At dusk, the tabby cat has made her usual rounds, but these days are shorter now, and she keens the darkness coming sooner. She hugs the walls and sneaks across the alleyway, one lone meteor rushing headlong home. Behind the restaurant, amid lengthening shadows, the cashier beats an empty can with his spoon, calling her to a dinner of leftover fish heads, their gelatinous eyes a shimmer of pearls, promising a succulent return to the primal sea. The cook inside fires up his wok, deeply patinaed, stir-frying slices of pork belly and vegetables, then adding a dollop of his secret shrimp paste, this tiny seed quickly blossoming into a bouquet, permeating the courtyards as the light recedes. The old-timer hanging his threadbare wash revels in the savory aroma of this serendipity. In the gloaming, he breaks out into song, his taut line of bleach-white clothes pegs paddling in unison into the gathering wind. On the balcony, the prostitute hums along, recalling the folk melodies of her childhood before the silvery moons waxed and waned. She sips from the restorative tea of her reverie, reluctant to leave when her shift begins. The baker has spied on her from his window, but he breaks away as it is time for his early bed. He sleeps through the violins rehearsing next door, his snores a chorus to their two-stringed melancholies. He will wake up refreshed before the cocks crow. What I just read is my pipe dream of what the streets of Honolulu Chinatown might have been like around the year 1900. I think it's an appropriate introduction to my book, The Old-Timers, which contains 82 pieces, mostly poems, but a few short stories and prose vignettes that imagine the lives of our forebears, the pioneer generation of Chinamen at the turn of the last century. So I'm going to read a few selections from this collection. And to follow the water theme, my next piece is about a fish pond. The native Hawaiians constructed sophisticated fish ponds all along the coastline of the islands in Hawaii to raise saltwater fish. 100 years ago, one Chinaman named Lugon leased one of these famous fish ponds near Pearl Harbor. His rent each year was $1,200 plus 18 crabs and 6 mullet fish. So I stowed the details of his operations for this particular poem. It's entitled A Hard Night's Work. At midnight, under the rising moon, you row a small boat to the deep end of the pond, closer to the seawall, laying out your linen net in an elongated crescent. Then from the shallows in front of the mouth of the crescent, you zigzag back and forth, banging your pole on the side of your boat and smacking your paddle against the flat surface of the water. You shout at the top of your lungs, rousing the sleeping fish. They bolt into your net, which you pull up end to end, your hand over fist. You make fast work of plucking out the fatter fish, snagged by their gills. Quickly you lay out your net again and haul in another catch, and then another and another, until your boat sits low in the water, until the fish piled up beside you weigh as much as you do. They gasp for air, and you take deep breaths. Back on shore, you wash down your boat, stretch out your net to dry across large racks, and sort the fish into their proper bamboo baskets to be driven into town, to be sold in the morning. Some are as long as your arm, some have tapered snouts and rasping teeth, and others bulge with eyes so clear you can peer into them and foresee your own hard death. Only then do you rest lying on your back beside the pond. You listen to the waves lapping the limestone and gaze up at the stars, tens of thousands of tiny silver fingerlings shimmering in the vast dark ocean. But you are fast asleep before dawn. My grandfather had a general store in Honolulu, Chinatown. From immigration documents that are found in the National Archives in San Bruno, California, plus family lore, and also even a school paper that was written by my father at the University of Hawaii, I was able to piece together details of what the operation of this store was like. It's a general store, which was in existence before the turn of the last century and lasted for about 20 years. So this next poem is entitled, In the Store. The rumors about the fight at the sugar mill swirl around the saltfish and traveler's plums, the sleek sausages hanging under the open transom, the dried scallops, fat medallions of gold sorted by origin in wicker baskets. A barber comes in early to buy young ginger, but stays a while to chat with the school teacher's petite wife who is looking for peanut oil. Before she leaves, she coaxes her toddler to recite a quatrain out loud. All the uncles applaud, and the little girl gets to choose a rock candy from the tall glass jar under the counter. In the far corner of the courtyard, besides blue bundles of fishing lines and nets, the letter writer at his table listens patiently as the house painter relates the death of his brother. The two agree, however, to omit any mention to his widow of how he had died of opium poisoning. As the two get up to leave, a kinsman who raises ducks by the marshes presses a small coin without a word into the painter's gaunt hand. At the long counter, the taro farmer arranges with the owner to settle his accounts. He confesses the work in the fields is too harsh and he must return to care for his ailing wife. The government postman arrives with a thin envelope addressed to the stonecutter in care of the store. It is placed inside a locked drawer behind the main counter and will be picked up by the old man when his native wife stop in as usual the next Sunday. At noon, a clerk is sent out to buy vegetables. Another clerk doubles as the cook, and everyone eats their lunches discreetly, standing at their stations. They leave the scraps for a pair of calico cats, just enough to keep them coming around, but not enough to stop their hunt for rats. Rather than losing it again, a gambler sends his night's winnings to his mother. The cashier collects his money and will mail a coded letter back to the village, where an elder holds a chest of silver for the store. The purveyor of bean curd pudding asks to barter for this week's delivery. Instead of cash, he will exchange his whole freshly made bucket for their best grade of tobacco. Surrounded by large tins of assorted tea in the storeroom off the kitchen, the owner's son fills out the manifest and shipping declarations in between his English school assignments. Rice growers gather on the wide front lanai to complain about the sparrows, dark flocks swooping, devouring their crops. A few talk about buying a scattergun as a last resort. In the mezzanine where they keep imported abalone and decades-old tangerine peels, the fugitive and his supporters, heads bowed, murmur softly in earnest discussion about the next rally. Clerks later on clear out a space for a card table among the displays of kitchen crockery. After work, the owner and his buddies will stick around for a night of gin rummy. Newly arrived, a teenager is introduced all around, where he is from, whom he is related to, what manner of work he has done. The old-timers take in his every word about home. Thank you. In the 1930s, a sociologist named Paul Siu interviewed dozens of Chinese laundrymen in the Chicago area, so very close to here. This study turned into his dynamite book entitled The Chinese Laundryman. Much of this work is in the voices of these men candidly talking about their lives, their hard work, their loneliness, and their few pleasures. In the book, Siu provided a floor plan of a typical laundry, and I used this guide to write my next poem entitled The Laundryman. You would think our work would be fresh and clean, bathed as we are in soap and water, But I can only see in front of me the day's crumpled shirts full of sweat and grime, the urine-stained underwear and mud-splattered pants, napkins smeared with food and drink, sometimes bedsheets with menstrual blood or handkerchiefs caked in snot, all gathering in the humid air in small spent piles in the back room. They will need to be steeped in hot water and scrubbed over the washboard, then cranked through stiff rollers to be wrung out to dry and pressed down flat by a sad iron straight from the stove. Only later, as eyes adjust to night, can they be fluffed and folded, wrapped in rice paper, neatly tied into separate bundles and placed on a shelf behind the counter. Only then will they be ready to be picked up, waiting for you to pick up at your leisure. In 1900, there was a Chinaman who was discovered to have died from the bubonic plague. And since the Black Death was widespread in China, the authorities in Hawaii quarantined all of Chinatown in Honolulu with a lockdown imposed, preventing anyone from going in or out. They also instituted controlled burns of any building where any new victims of the plague were found. Unfortunately, on January 20th, 1900, which was just about 125 years ago, one burn got out of control, causing a conflagration that consumed 38 acres of this thriving neighborhood. A detailed account of this is found in a book called Plague and Fire by James Moore. So what made the writing of this section of my book most relevant for me was I wrote these poems during the first years of our COVID pandemic. So there's some resonance to the lockdown and illnesses, etc. So today I'm going to read this one poem entitled The Fire. The Health Board condemns the shanties as someone inside has died from the plague. Other inhabitants are summarily evicted, gathering whatever they can, but with nowhere to go. The fire department surrounds the perimeter, poised with their hoses for the start of the burn. A crowd converges, curious, angry, and resigned, and worried that they themselves will be next. The fire is ignited as rehearsed, but unexpected gusts come down from the valley. Firemen vainly try to contain its spread. People are stunned, immobile, uncertain about what to do. Before long, embers billow up, wafted by the wind, and jump from rooftop to rooftop. Residents rush to stamp out spot fires, tearing down even their own houses to form fire breaks. Narrow alleyways turn into gauntlets of flame. A fireball scours the street, combusting all in its path. Faces are blistered, hair singed, eyes wide from fear. Everyone is shouting, drowning out the chaos. A store selling fireworks for the new year explodes. A lumber yard blazes. A few run home to retrieve gold or papers. Most, though, just flee with the clothes on their backs. Inexorably, the inferno marches toward the wharves. It melts electric coils and a hastily abandoned fire engine. Volunteers carry on their backs women with bound feet. Opium addicts, delirious, are rescued from their den. The refugees try to escape the conflagration, wanting to cross the bridge over the stream, but quarantine militia, pick handles ready, block their way, leaving them to huddle in a no-man's land to wait. Sparks fly into the steeple of the church. Soon it becomes a furnace, consuming its beams. Unsupported, its bells crash into the sanctuary below. All of Chinatown hears this dirge. I'm going to read from the last section of my book, which has to do with death and dying. So one of the poems was based on another relative, my uncle, who contracted tuberculosis and died in Hawaii in 1911. So one of the earliest memories that his son had was of this little bell which his father rang whenever he needed something. So this little observation or family lore inspired me to imagine a poem about one of these pioneers who had also contracted tuberculosis. This is called Eldest Brother. Eldest brother was bedridden, his face pale as ivory worn from worry, his body shriveled, skin peeling off bones. His lungs were patches of taro ravaged by a nighttime storm. Exhausted, he kept coughing for days on end, spitting out blood. We kept him in his own corner of the room, with blankets hung enshrouding him. Still, we would talk story, although it was mostly us who did the talking. There was always his hacking. When we brought in his soup or took out his spittoon, he would speak in a hoarse whisper, slowly and deliberately. What time is it? I hope this new medicine works. I want to walk outside. How is the crop of rice doing? Once he had been so vigorous, delivering what we had harvested from the fields into town, always watching over us, stopping us from quarreling and reminding everyone how bountiful this life was, so much better than the life we once had left behind. When someone had to speak up, it was always him. He smiled at our jokes, but his eyes were sad. After he died, we steamed his hat, soaked his blanket and cot in boiling water, scrubbed out the room, including the ceiling, and buried his corpse, so light, deep in the earth. We only saved his bell, this last trace of him, the one he had used to summon us. It was the size of a lotus poised to bloom, and even amid his coughing and blood, it always rang clear and true. This next poem was inspired by two friends of mine, a husband and a wife, who faced some challenges in their old age. The wife with several health problems, while the husband had to deal with the loss of his short-term memory. A few years ago, the wife died, and the husband was unable to remember her death, which caused complications when friends came to offer condolences. So for whatever reason, I was piqued by what I had learned and adapted the husband's response into a poem about two cousins, again in the 1900 period, who came to Hawaii around that particular time. This is entitled Remember. You can remember chasing pigs with your cousin, the same age as you, growing up together in the village among a large extended family. You can remember vomiting in turn on the rocking ship when the two of you, still in your teens, journeyed to our islands. You can remember digging ditches side by side in a taro patch, sequestered within the hush of that valley. You can remember both of you moving into town to take jobs in your kinsman's coffee shop, you waiting on tables and he in the kitchen as a short order cook, always on simmer. You can remember enjoying your retirements, spending your days in the district clubhouse, playing mahjong, sharing a freshly baked pie, and catching up on every small rumor about the uprisings back home. But nowadays, you cannot remember what you ate for breakfast this morning, or what you read in the newspaper last night, or the fruit you often hoarded, which we kept finding behind your bed weeks later, shrunk and moldy. Neither can you remember that last week we discovered your cousin lying on the top bunk, having died in his sleep, like an incense stick reaching its destined end. And when we told you that you broke down and sobbed, and then that when an old friend called to offer condolences, you did not know what he was talking about, and so you were shocked once more to learn that your cousin had died, and again became so agitated and wept, the swarm of bees returning only to fly away soon. And this was repeated each time when 3 more old-timers visited you, making all of us distraught, so much so that we must decide to hold back the others who show up later. It is of no good use, we say to each other, as you will not remember anyway anyone who now comes, much less why. And I'm going to read this for someone who is dear to me, who is now in a skilled nursing home. I wrote this poem several years ago, but I thought tonight I would share it with you because of this person that I know now who's in this facility. Her face. I do not know what day it is, or whether it is day or night, or how long I have been here, wherever I am. Whenever I wake, she is here, her face in front of me, always within my vision, watching, peering, observing, looking while I look back. She talks to me, shares her gossip, sings hymns or village lullabies, reads out loud from her favorite primer, as if I am listening, and even if I am not. Her hair is now gray, reaches down in one long braid to the small of her back. Her overbite is gone, replaced by black gaps where the teeth once were. Her fingers are crooked, her knuckles gnarled, her skin rough and calloused. But she is all business, her back erect, her eyes deliberate, her voice steady and calm. She waves her sandalwood fan above my head. She combs my matted hair. Her palms smooth my blanket. She holds up a spoon and waits for me. I'm going to end with this poem, which is based or inspired by a writer named David Hinton, who has written about Buddhism and Taoism, and especially how these ancient Asian religions have influenced contemporary contemporary American poetry. So I thought I would take a particular poem that he had analyzed about a man who became a recluse, a poet who became a recluse and lived in the mountains during his last days. And again, I appropriated that particular observation of his into this poem about someone who was living in the time period of my book, the early 1900s in Hawaii. Within the dragon's breath. When I first arrived inside the heart of the valley, the morning mist still enshrouded the mountaintops, their fluted cliffs a dance of sunlight and shadows surrounding our patchwork of jade-green farms like a tomb. Years of taro and mud indeed drained my life force, a lotus once blossoming as an unquenchable fire. I retreated up to the ridgeline, my clothes ragged, the small of my back a gnarl of knots and woes. Now I huddle in my hut beneath a stand of sandalwood. At dawn I awaken the birds calling to their mates. I am everywhere engulfed by clouds, and in the dim light all of my senses are alert. At these times, the only thing that matters is the present, within the dragon's breath, billowing, unfurling, sometimes damp and dense, sometimes effervescent, and then in a flash, this fog is gone. Instead, below, my eyes follow the far river as it spills out like the arms of a lover outstretched into the sea, into the hard blue of the horizon, and inexorably to the land of our ancestors beyond. Thank you.